It's a huge pleasure to be back in Delhi again. This is the very first World Sustainable Development Summit, but of course it builds on many years of the Delhi Sustainable Development Summit. And its promotion, if you like, from city to global is entirely appropriate, and you could say overdue, because the WSDS tackled many of the crucial global challenges that are facing us, not least climate change. And that's reflected in the title of this summit, Beyond 2015. That refers in particular to the 2015 Paris Climate Accords, now on the verge of entering into force following the speedy ratification by many countries, not least India. So this is a cause for celebration. It's also a challenge. The Paris Accord set a hugely ambitious, one might even say courageous target of keeping global temperature rises to 1.5 to 2 degrees above pre-industrial levels. And just to remind us of the scale of that challenge, we're already over 1 degree, something around 1.3 degrees and rising fast. So we have just cause to celebrate the Paris agreements, but no cause for complacency. We're already seeing the impacts of global warming just at that 1 degree rise. You only need to look at some of the studies of what might happen to the climate if we hit 3 or 4 degrees. Recent studies showing the impact, for example, on the monsoon cycle, and it all looks a little bit scary. So we need to tame the climate tiger. And to do that, we'll need to draw on every ounce of human ingenuity and resolve. We need to unleash a wave of creativity and innovation not seen since the Industrial Revolution. And that is where business can take center stage. Governments can do a great deal, but governments cannot do it all. We need the energy, we need the enterprise, we need the sheer entrepreneurial fire of business to deliver solutions. Solutions which not only calm the climate for the future, but also help improve our lives in the here and now. Solutions which can lift millions out of poverty, while at the same time curbing emissions. And of course, there is no contradiction between the two. Doing both at the same time is the very definition of sustainable development. So, with all that in mind, we are lucky indeed to have at the WSDS a host of business and government leaders who are at the very forefront of the fight against climate change. We've got some hugely distinguished panels and what should be some fascinating discussions. And I'd now like to welcome the speakers to our inaugural session. First, we have the Honourable Minister, Sri Jayant Sinha, the Minister of State for Civil Aviation. Sir, please join us. We have Mr. R. Mukundan, Managing Director, Tata Chemicals, and Chair of its Executive Committee. We have Dr. Ajay Mathur, who is Director General of TERI. We have Mr. Eric Solheim, UNEP Executive Director and Under Secretary General of the UN. And we have Mr. Ashok Chawla, Chairman of TERI, and Dr. Annapurna Vancheswaran, Senior Director at TERI, in charge of Sustainable Outreach and Youth Education. Now, I'd like to call on Mr. Ashok Chawla, Chairman of TERI, to introduce the session. Thank you.
Honorable Minister Jayant Sinha, Secretary General Eric Solheim, my colleagues R. Mukundan, Ajay Mathur, Annapurna, Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome, a very warm welcome to the first formal event of the World Sustainable Development Summit. As was just mentioned, this is the first in a series of the World Summits, but it actually builds on a long history of what TERI has been doing over the last 15, 16 years. We devote this day to business and its engagement with the Sustainable Development Goals and climate change. While the agenda is set by governments and political leaders, the battle in the trenches has to be fought by a host of stakeholders. an important one being business and industry. In recognition, TERI has set up a Council for Business Sustainability, and this council has actually put together today's event. We bring you an interesting day with 2 plenary sessions and a grand finale in the evening with an address by a business leader, a special address on sustainable energy, and a valedictory address by India's Energy Minister. Ladies and gentlemen, the business community has been increasingly engaged in the implementation of the future agenda. Engaged in terms of technical know-how, engaged in terms of collaborations, engaged in all forms to carry it forward. However, let me acknowledge that we need to make the association more comprehensive and broad-based. From TERI, we will work relentlessly towards that end, but that cannot be achieved without the enthusiastic response of industry. I have no doubt that as we move ahead, we will get more engagement, a more favorable response to implement the ambitious agenda the global community has accepted for itself. With these few words, let me not stand between you and the Minister and the Secretary General. Welcome again, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you.
Honorable Minister, Mr. Sri Jayant Sinha, UNEP Executive Director, Mr. Eric Solheim, Chairman, Mr. Chawla, DG, Mr. Mathur, and Director TERI, Annapurna, and distinguished guests and friends. It is indeed my honor and privilege to be here with you at the inaugural session. As we are all aware, India has recently ratified the Paris Convention. Hence, what we, when I mean we, the civil society, government, and industry has jointly agreed is now our commitment to the world. From my perspective, industry is no longer a bystander, but is an active participant in this engagement on sustainability. We all have committed to certain goals, and these goals, especially the SDGs and the commitments, were, for the first time, I think, truly co-created. And we stand fully alongside the civil society and the government in our responsibility to fulfill our commitment. Industry has a large influencing power. In effect, about 100 companies control about 70% of resource movement around the world. And we also have a large influencing power on our consumers. Hence, it is with that perspective, TERI set up this Council for Business Sustainability, which has been actively working towards bringing like-minded industries together and also making sure industries work together in terms of having the right framework and implement sustainability agenda. TERI CBS is an independent, credible platform for corporate leaders related to sustainability development. Presently, the network has over 100 corporate members representing a huge swath of Indian industry, including PSUs, MNCs, and private companies from across India. The challenges we face and the risks which are there upon us because of climate change are all very clear to us, and hence this sharp focus on sustainable development which we all must embark upon. Consequently, this nexus of planet, people, and progress assumes significant importance, and the theme, which is beyond 2015, people, planet, progress, mobilizing business strategies, is a very, very apt one. In this regard, I think this will mark a clear day for us, all of us, to reflect, to recommit, and to move forward in making sure that we build a sustainable future for all of us. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And now, Dr. Mathur.
Minister Jayant Sinha, UNEP Executive Director, Mr. Solheim, Mr. Mukundan, Mr. Chawla, Annapurna, friends. As Mr. Chawla mentioned, this is the first plenary function of the World Sustainable Development Summit. And we all hope that this summit proves to be the time when we are able to move action from the few to the most. As has been pointed out, This will largely be done through the actions of you and I as civil society, of businesses that support the actions that we want to take, and of government that enables these actions to be taken. The TERI Council for Business Sustainability brings together, as Mr. Mukundan said, like-minded companies who are today part of the few. We want to get the messages, the lessons, the kinds of best practices out to now the many. As we do this, we will engage, we will support, we will work with businesses in India and abroad, and indeed with governments in India and abroad. The goal is to hold hands of both businesses and governments so that we can help them bring about the change that is needed for the action to move to the most. We are today on a day that follows the ratification of the Paris Agreement by the European Parliament. An en bloc ratification rather than by each country as one by one. This means that possibly tomorrow the 30-day countdown to the Paris Agreement's coming into force starts. And when the parties to the Climate Change Convention meet in Marrakesh next month, the Paris Agreement will have probably come into force. However, for the Paris Agreement to be effective, for you and I to be able to provide our bit to this, we need to ensure that there are technologies, there is financing, there is best practices, and there are options available to all. This is what we look forward to achieving today in the business day and over the next 4 days in the World Sustainable Development Summit. I look forward to a very exciting 4 days where we can work on, as I said, taking action from a few to the most. Thank you very much.
Thanks very much. And now, Mr. Solheim, please.
Mr. Minister, all other friends, yesterday I spent a day in Varanasi, not just because it's the constituency of the Prime Minister, but because it's one of the most vibrant, fantastic, holy, beautiful places on the planet, the city of Shiva, the city of light. It's one, you cannot find a more fascinating place. But there is also a major problem, of course, in Varanasi and along, indeed, the river Ganges. The river is horribly polluted. There is any number of sanitation coming into the river. The industry is polluting the river. And it's so polluted that it's disgusting to everyone. That's, of course, why the Prime Minister has put in place a project to clean river Ganga. And I think it will be successful. But it can only be successful if it's seen as a business engagement. If these are seen as business opportunities, governments must regulate markets for sure, but there is any number of business opportunity coming from a big endeavor like the cleaning of River Ganga. Solid waste, pollution, plastic, let's see them as resources for future development, and let's see this as ways of promoting business, big and small. Then it will succeed. That's by far the impression from every other point of the world. When government regulate market, but they leave it to business to find the solutions, then you are moving ahead. And let's extend this to the even wider picture. I mean, congratulations to India. It's fantastic, the move by Prime Minister Modi to ratify the Paris Agreement and doing at the birthday of Mahatma Gandhi. That's really to follow in the footsteps of the great leader. And also making the small point to all of us that if we embrace the lifestyle, each of us of Mahatma Gandhi a little bit more, the problems in the world will be a little bit less. I think that was a strong, fantastic message. I mean, also building upon Mahatma Gandhi's own word, that please be the change that you want to see in the world. But, this is also very important, of course, globally, because when the United States, China, India, and Europe are all ratifying the climate agreement, there is nowhere to hide. The business or the political leader who want not to go along, they don't know where to hide. Because the main powers of the world have said, this is the direction we will jointly walk, then everyone else is following. And we will also see the agreement ratified this year. But also on the Paris Agreement, there is a need for a shift of the atmosphere or the way of thinking. Far too often in many parts of the world, and also sometimes among the shattering classes here in Delhi, you get the perspective that embracing the climate agenda is a big expense. It's a big problem rather than an opportunity. Embracing the climate agenda is an enormous opportunity for Indian business. There is any number of jobs out there in renewable energies, in climate-smart agriculture, in mass transit systems, in the greening of the cities, basically everywhere in the agenda of moving into climate resilience, there will be new profits to be made, new jobs to happen, and indeed more interesting, more successful, better jobs. And that getting that perspective that climate is not a burden, but an opportunity, that we will go a long way to resolve the problem. By the way, that was why Paris was so successful compared to Copenhagen. In Copenhagen, most businesses came with the attitude that, climate is so big a problem, so harmful to us. And since the bill will be so high, let me push it over to someone else. I'm the United States of America, but even I cannot cover that bill, so let me push it to China and India. And I'm China, well, the bill is too big, I put it to someone else. In Paris, business basically came with the attitude that there is any number of jobs, any number of smart solutions, any number of profits out there to be made if we embrace that agenda. And that's why Paris was so successful, while Copenhagen was, in all realities, a disaster. So there is no way we can move ahead without business. The UN historically has not, the United Nations has not historically been good of business. We have been reluctant. We came as India from a somewhat left-wing attitude that business is, you need business, but it's not really the good guys of the world. This needs to change. And we are on the way to change, but we need to change much faster, also in the UN. As the head of the United Nations Environment, I will make sure that business will be the top of our agenda for wherever we seek a solution. We will be ready to make agreements with individual businesses, with federations of businesses, and work with business, because without business we will not see the change we want in this world. The technologies, the outreach, the financial resources, business is at the center of whatever we want to do. And by the way, the UN will not be able to do the trick. Let's give a thought to, let's assume that the United Nations want to make an electric car. We wouldn't even agree on the color. The Muslim nations will say, it must be green. The left-wing nations will say, it must be red. The United States, the color of the Democratic Party is blue, they will say blue. And then Buddhist nations will say it must be yellow. We will not be able to agree on anything. There will be 7 doors, 5 plugging system, and any number of colors, and we will not get it right. Business can get the technical solutions right. We, as politicians, can frame the markets in the right way. Let me give you 2 or 3 clear messages, which I think are essential. Number 1, let us start following the big money more than the small money. The big money which we need to shift in the world sits with the sovereign wealth funds, the banks, the insurance companies, all the big investors. And unless we are able to drive that investment in a greener direction, we will fail. Far too often we put our eyes on the development aid, which is needed, and we need more of that, rather than on the big investment. And there is any number of need for green bonds and specific instruments for the greening of the industries and the business sector. But at the end of the day, it's all about getting the core business right to get inclusive, green, responsible capitalism to exchange brown inequality, not inclusive, and irresponsible capitalism. And then the stock exchanges must regulate the markets, the central banks must regulate the markets, the ministers of finance are key for this agenda, and we need to reach out beyond the group of converted environmentalists and into the finance markets. And the United Nations Environment has set up an inquiry to look into that, and the conclusions are very clear. The reasons why the big banks and financial institutions are not really going into the green is all about risks. They don't understand the risks connected with this. They see risks when sometimes there are no risks, and we should use the financial resources of the state to leverage risk. To take some of the risks out of markets, if they are there, 10, 20%, to give the insurance premium so that you can get the investment in the right direction. There is no lack of money in the world. There is abundance of money in the world. The big investors are basically running around trying to find somewhere to put the money. At the same time, there's no lack of good ideas, programs, and projects out there, but simply the money and the programs don't match. And we need to get them to match, and then we need to take some of the risk from the private sector to get that to be done faster. So that's number one. Let's follow the big money. Second is, let's look to the opportunities of business in every area, and let's not waste the money, but let's use the money wisely. Let's get value for money. What does that mean? That it means that when we want to do climate or environment, we should, to the extent possible, avoid grants. Nothing is wrong with a grant, but far too often the international community, being North-South cooperation or South-South cooperation, or governments do grants. And grants cannot resolve the problem simply because there is not enough money with development aid nor with governments to really solve the problems through grants. So let's avoid grants and look into, whenever there is a problem, how we can rather leverage the private sector with taking 10, 20, 30% of the risk on the public budget or the aid budget and initiate action from the private sector. That's a big issue for the world. Development aid in the world this year is about $140 billion American dollars. If you add China, Arabs, and some more, it may be 160 billion American dollars. Even that big money, given as grants, will have limited influence on the world. But that money, as a leveraging mechanism for much more private sector investment, will have an enormous impact on the world. So let's avoid wasting the money on small projects and look into how we can do it as a leveraging tool for the private sector. So let's follow the big money. Let's ask for value for money. And finally, let's always remember that this is all about individual. It's all about human beings. And end up with one example right here from India about that. The Coca-Cola, which may not be your favorite company, not mine, but they try to involve in good programs and projects sometimes. They have added up with Western Solar, a Mumbai-based solar company. What they are doing is providing a solar-based cooler system for small vendors all over India. This is transforming the life of some of these small vendors. One of them is Mrs. Gupta in Agra. She has now money to bring her 3 children to university or to higher education, to take care of the health needs of her business. And that is because this combined effort of the solar company and the Coca-Cola is giving her the opportunity to make more money simply because the cooling system creates a huge number of new customers. The beauty of this is, of course, that Coca-Cola has an outreach that most governments do not have. May I end up with another example of this? I was just in China, where we met with a big company in the financial fintech sector, which is called Ants Finances. It's an offspring of the Alibaba Group. They have 450 million customers, all over China. They have an outreach in China, which maybe President Xi Jinping do have, but hardly anyone else. And they use this platform on the mobile phone to reach out to people with the ability to buy green bonds, but also to compete. Let's assume that I wanted to compete with the minister as to who's the most environmentally friendly of us. If the minister were to buy a new refrigerator, which was the state of the art, the best in the market, he will get some point on the cellular phone. If I then were to walk to the job tomorrow, I will get some points. And then the competition, very soon you get a tree on your mobile phone, shows up, and then the company plant a physical tree in Inner Mongolia, which is, as you know, the desert part of China, and you can go and embrace the tree. The minister can go there, he can look into the tree, get the GPS coordinates, and then can embrace the tree. If he's particularly environmentally friendly, he will get a small forest in Inner Mongolia, and I can compete with him, or with my neighbor, or with my wife, or whoever it is. The point here is the following. There is no way small NGOs, even governments, can reach out to people in the way the private sector can, and they have the resources, the technology which we need, so we need simply to step up in a completely new league when it comes to private sector engagement if we want to solve the big environmental and climate problems of the day. And at the end of this, if we do that, we will also serve Mrs. Gupta Inaugural, who wants to bring her children to higher education from her small vendor business, which is based on solar and which is engaged with Coca-Cola. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Some inspiring words. And now the Honourable Minister, Sri Jayant Sinha, is going to address us. I think, sir, you've agreed to take a couple of short questions at the end, so please go ahead, sir.
Executive Director of the United Nations Environmental Programme, Mr. Solheim, Mr. Ashok Chawla, Chairman of TERI, Mr. Mukundan, CEO of Tata Chemicals, Mr. Ajay Mathur, Director of TERI, other distinguished panelists, Your Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, members of the media. First of all, I want to congratulate and thank TERI for organizing, as they've done for so many years, such an outstanding summit that brings together collaborators, stakeholders, business people, policymakers, people from all across the spectrum. People with many different ideologies, many different approaches to really think, talk, and very importantly, and I really liked the way which you've set it up here at the India Habitat Center, the social capital and the relationships that are necessary to solve these very difficult challenges that we face. I have just one small quibble that I do want to mention, which is that I would perhaps like it more than rather than having it here in this very splendid and wonderful India Habitat Center, if you could actually take this summit and take it to real India, take it to Chhattisgarh, take it to Madhya Pradesh, take it to Jharkhand, take it to Assam, where people are dealing with these problems on a real basis, on a day-to-day basis. And if we do so, we'll get out of one of my big criticisms of this whole approach of the conference circuit, of being in the global capitals of the world, but take it to where the problems are real, where the problems are the most acute, and give people a first-hand sense of it, because that's what's necessary to solve these issues and problems that we have of sustainability. And let's not kid ourselves. Let's not diminish the scale and the magnitude of the issues that we are dealing with. We all know that the planet is at risk right now. We've just crossed the 400 parts per million carbon dioxide concentration in the atmosphere. Year after year after year, the planet is recording the hottest years that we've ever recorded before. The planet and all of our lives and everything we do is at risk. And so we have to really engage on these issues of sustainability. And we have to find solutions that can not only work, but that they can scale up and really begin to change the way in which we live and the way in which we go about our business and go about all the other things that we do in our daily lives. And in this, as the Honorable Executive Director was mentioning, businesses are not something that are incidental. Businesses are not something that we have to bring into this whole set of issues. Businesses and the markets that they represent are going to be the fundamental way in which we are going to have to solve these problems. Because if there's anything that has taken us to prosperity, if there's anything that has enabled us to solve the big problems that our societies face, it's been markets and innovative businesses. And so as we confront these existentialist issues that we do with sustainability, we have to get markets to work. We've got to have businesses that innovate, and we've got to ensure through those businesses, through those solutions, those products and services, that the necessary behavioral change, the necessary revolutionary changes that we need are required. As the Honorable Executive Director was just saying, if you look at the Ganga today, the Ganga is a horribly polluted river. And it has gotten polluted, it has gotten into this state, not overnight, ladies and gentlemen. It has not happened in a few days. It's happened over centuries. It's happened through an accumulation of behaviors and business approaches and things that we have done that now need to change. And it is this detritus, this accumulation of centuries that now have to be transformed. That is revolutionary, radical change. This is not incidental. This is not complementary. This is fundamental transformational change. And when the Honorable Prime Minister talks about transforming India, this is part of what he talks about. We have to transform India so that we can move towards a sustainable future. And that is why on Mahatma Gandhi's birthday, October the 2nd, we made the commitment for the Paris Accord, because it is fundamental to the values, to the traditions of this country, and it is absolutely vital and necessary for our future. So if we have to move to a sustainable future, if we have to find a way in which we can undergo this transformation, to make these radical and revolutionary changes happen, what do we have to emphasize? What do we need to focus on? And I would submit that there are three very important aspects that we need to think about for this transformational change to happen. The first very important aspect we have to think about is how do we innovate so that when we get people to change their behaviors, when we change our way of life, that those changes stick, that those changes actually are also sustainable. And the reason I say that a conference like this should be in real India, should be in places where people are struggling with these issues on a day-to-day basis, is because then we can understand how difficult it is to actually make this transformational change happen. How difficult is it? And I'll tell you about a program that our government is running right now, which is part of this transformational change, and that is the Swachh Bharat Abhiyan. If we want a sustainable future, we have to make this country open defecation free. And we are struggling and working through that in my own constituency, in my own district of Hazaribagh. And as you know, it's not about building toilets. It's actually not that hard to build a toilet in every home. These toilets cost 12,000 rupees, 15,000 rupees. We can build it, and we are building it. These toilets are being built. But what is hard is the behavioral change. How do we ensure that we understand the issues, the real life issues that are required for this kind of radical behavioral change? That is very much an important part of thinking through these kinds of transformations and achieving sustainability thereof. And let me give you an example. What we've tried to do is we've tried to build toilets in every one of our schools, in all the elementary schools. And so in all the schools we've gone in my district, and there are over 1,200 elementary schools in my district, and said, let's build toilets for boys and for girls. Then I sat down with the principals of these schools and I said, okay, the toilets have been built. Are they being used? Has the behavioral change happened? And what the principals told me, they said, sir, we are struggling. I said, why are you struggling? We've built the toilets. They said, sir, we built the toilets. But we very often don't have the electricity. Very often we don't have the water. And then we need a boundary wall. I said, why do you need a boundary wall in the school? You've built the toilets. Why do you need how is that connected to sanitation, building a boundary wall? They said, sir, don't you understand? When the toilets don't have electricity and the toilets don't have water, they are dirty. Nobody wants to go into those toilets. And they will always go into the fields adjoining the school. So we have to build a boundary wall so that they don't leave. That's behavioral change. Those are the transformational things that need to happen. And only then will we be able to move towards this much more sustainable future. This is the kind of transformation that's necessary. We have to think not just first order, building a toilet. We have to think second and third order if we want the genuine transformational change to happen. So that's the first aspect. What are customer needs? What are the second order, third order things we have to anticipate? And how do we respond to that quickly, effectively, efficiently, innovatively? Very difficult. The second set of issues that we have to grapple with, and this is something that is our responsibility in government, because if we have to get these markets to work, we have to put in place the appropriate regulations, the appropriate tariffs, and ensure that there is ease of doing business and the cost of doing business is as low as possible. So governments have to learn to think completely differently in some ways. Rather than thinking only in terms of control and licensing and permitting, we have to think in terms of facilitating. We have to think in terms of how do we make it easier for businesses, for innovators to make these solutions happen. And that, ladies and gentlemen, is not easy for governments to do. It's a challenge for governments around the world to really act as facilitators. But that is something we have to do. We have to make it easier to bring forward these solutions. We have to put in place the appropriate regulations. Take waste management. Our cities are choking in garbage. Our cities are choking in garbage. But do we have the policy regime in place in our cities so that the trash can be picked up? People pay for that pickup of trash. The trash is compacted. The trash then goes to a waste-to-energy incineration plant or to a landfill and is properly disposed of. How does that whole chain, everything that's required for sustainable waste management, how does that be translated into viable businesses, be done in a way that is as efficient and effective as possible, and so that all the prices are appropriately reflected in what consumers pay, and that then businesses can operate efficiently and effectively. How do we do that? Do we have the policy regime in place? Do we have the regulations in place to do that? These are very difficult challenges we confront as we take on these sustainability challenges, and that is the responsibility of government. A long way to go, ladies and gentlemen, but we are working on it. Sustainability. I'm a finance person. If we want sustainability and a sustainable future, we have to have sustainable business models. We have to make sure the returns are there, commensurate with the risk that innovators and business people take to forge these new markets, to create these new markets. How do we ensure adequate returns? The amount of, as the Honorable Executive Director mentioned, we have to enable businesses to invest. We have to enable businesses to be able to satisfy these markets. But for that, they have to be able to generate adequate returns so that the big money, as he was saying, the big money comes in and these kinds of solutions get financed. That's a big challenge. And unless we get our regulations and our tariffs appropriately set up, that kind of financing is not going to happen, and we are not going to be able to attract the debt capital or the equity capital to finance these massive, massive build-outs that are required. We need billions of dollars in India alone for some of these sustainability solutions to be brought to market at scale. And you might remember that last time when I was here, I spoke about electric two-wheelers. And I said that if we have to become the world's hub for electric two-wheelers, we have to build massive, at scale, factories for electric batteries. That requires billions and billions of dollars of debt and equity capital. How do we mobilize that kind of financing to come up with these large-scale solutions that are necessary for us to really unlock this transformational change and to build a sustainable future? So, ladies and gentlemen, these are three very profound challenges we face. The behavioral change, the innovation that's required for this kind of radical transformation. Number two, the appropriate policy and regulations to enable these markets to work. And number three, sufficient capital to really build out and bring these solutions at a sufficiently large enough scale so that we are able to achieve such radical transformation. These are difficult challenges, but that's why, ladies and gentlemen, you are here. I'm sure as you go through this conference today and tomorrow, as you discuss all these issues and challenges, you'll find innovative solutions to all of that. I look forward to continuing to engage with you on this dialogue, on this discussion. Thank you very, very much.
Thank you very much, Minister. Now we have time for 2 questions to the Minister. I'm sure there are some, if you stick your hands up prominently. We have one gentleman over there. Yes, please, sir.
So, thank you, sir, for your nice speech. I have a question which is slightly related to your sector. So, our aviation sector is growing very rapidly. We have 19% growth. So, I was on a flight and reading this magazine that there's 19% growth in traffic, air traffic. And airline emissions are difficult to tackle. We can use biofuels in airlines, but that's a long way off. Whereas the users of airline services are more rich compared to the other people in India. So have you looked at within your ministry some measures so that these companies can offset their emissions, or they can support initiatives so that there's more awareness among the flyers, and as well as there's some money for offsetting the emissions and making aviation sector greener? Thank you.
Can you hear me? Yep, the mic is on. No, thank you. That's an excellent question. And let me just correct you that the aviation sector is not just growing at 19%. In fact, our growth has been well over 22, 23% in the last year or so. So you're exactly right. The aviation sector is growing very rapidly and is likely to continue to grow very rapidly over the next decade, decade and a half. And as a result of that, it will in fact be a contributor in a significant way to emissions. And so as a result of that, in the ministry and with all stakeholders, we are in consultations to see what we can do to offset some of those rising emissions.
So, like you see, this there are some sovereign funds in Gulf nations, like Public Investment Bureau and all. Like for example, Saudi Arabia has $2 billion. So my submission is that that whether we're exploring, because they want a kind of post-oil revenue stream for themselves, being aware that the fossil fuel future is not there, and they won't have fossil fuels to as a sustainable revenue stream for them. So, for example, Saudi Arabia has one of the largest fund of $2 billion. So, sir, are we, because as you mentioned that we need a lot of debt and equity capital. So I presume that these sovereign capital funds like Saudi Arabia's Public Investment Bureau, they would be very much interested in to have a sustainable revenue stream for themselves in ventures like as you mentioned that electric batteries production. So I'm just making a submission that whether we are doing something in this regard. Thank you very much, sir. My name is Dr. Mukhtar Alam from Center for Agriculture and Rural Development. Thank you, sir.
No, there's tremendous interest, as the Honorable Executive Director was also mentioning, by banks, pension funds, sovereign wealth funds to invest in a sustainable future. As you know, as far as India is concerned, we have established the National Infrastructure Investment Fund, NIF, and we are in discussions with a number of the sovereign wealth funds, including the ones in Abu Dhabi, Qatar, Kuwait, and so on, to discuss how we can establish various funds, including one that is actually fairly close to being announced, which is in the renewables area, so that we can mobilize this set of capital providers to invest in a more sustainable future.
Thank you very much. I was rather hoping we might have a question from a woman in the interest of gender
Question,
balance.
please. One question, please.
Well, one moment. I just want to see. Do we have a woman
sir.
who would like to ask a question in the interest of
Yes.
gender balance?
I am standing before you, sir.
I know you
Not
are,
visible
sir.
to you.
I don't think we do. So do we
Sir.
have time for one more,
Please,
Minister?
he's very
Please, sir,
insistent.
go ahead.
It's going overhead. Sir, for sustained development, government alone cannot do everything. You have to involve private participation, and there again, government role comes first. How do you enthuse, how do you attract private participation in sustained development?
Well, I come from the private sector, as you know, and I have a somewhat different way of thinking about it, which is it's not that we have to attract the private sector. The private sector or businesses, innovators, they are the ones that are going to make it happen. And that's traditionally how it's always happened over the last many, many centuries in terms of economic growth and progress. So they have to be the leaders. They have to be the people driving this fundamental transformation. And really our job as policymakers is to be able to support them and to be able to create well-functioning, well-regulated markets so that they can bring those innovations and enable us to be able to forge much more sustainable solutions. So really, our job is to ensure that the engines of progress, which is really the private sector, which is really markets, really function well as far as this set of challenges is concerned. So it's not about government inviting in the private sector. It's private sector that really drives the economy, and our job is to facilitate the private sector to enable this to happen.
Thank you very much, sir. Mr. Solheim.
If you allow me to add to that, I cannot agree more with what the Minister said. I think that's exactly the right perspective. But just to give you one example, I attended a conference in Washington the other day. And there President Obama spoke very, very, very emotionally about his two daughters. He said, "My two daughters do not know the concept of acid rain." Acid rain was seen as maybe the main environmental problem in Europe and the United States when Barack Obama and myself were relatively young people. Now it's gone. Why did it disappear? Well, governments in a dialogue with the private sector did set regulations. They were not regulations which needed to be implemented tomorrow, but government said, this is what you need to do tomorrow, this is what you need to do in 5 years' time, and this is what you need to do in 10 years' time. And then, as the Minister said, the private sector innovated very, very fast, found many technical solutions. And reality is that in my nation, Norway, the situation in nature is now better than at any point since before the Industrial Revolution. And that's happened through private sector engagement and business models, but regulated by states.
Thanks very much. Part of my job today is to keep us to time. So in that spirit, I'm going to invite Dr. Vancheswaran to give a vote of thanks, after which there will be a presentation. Thank you.
A very good afternoon to you, and it is a privilege to give the vote of thanks for the inaugural session of the 4-day event that was beginning today. It has been echoed all through the session that India became the 62nd nation to ratify the agreement on Sunday, marking the occasion of Gandhi Jayanti. And in the words of Ban Ki-moon, India has shown global leadership and vision. What does it mean on the ground? The Honorable Minister, Mr. Jayant Sinha, did give us a detail of some of them in terms of introducing waste management and disposal solutions. Generating a carbon sink is one of them, which is 2.5 billion to 3 million tons. Reducing carbon intensity, providing cleaner air for every citizen in this country. And these are some of the challenges that we have. India has shown its leadership, and now It's time for India's business sector to show that they are part of the solution for all of the above and much more. Today's inaugural session, as I said, marks the beginning of the four-day deliberation to follow from today until the end of the week as part of the World Sustainable Development Summit. Mobilizing business strategies and solutions, the theme of the business day of the WSDS, is timely, and the interventions and the discussions that will happen here will align businesses across India to the future development agenda. Honorable Minister, Mr. Jayant Sinha, it's indeed a pleasure and honor to thank you for inaugurating our summit and the business day. As you mentioned, we've had the opportunity of having you inaugurate this on Gandhi Jayanti Day and at a place where private sector has actually shown their way, which is at his airport, which is the Delhi airport, where they have become carbon neutral last week, and they are the only Asia-Pacific airport which is carbon neutral. So thank you very much, and may I have some slides of the minister inaugurating our summit on the Gandhi Jayanti Day. I would request the minister had a selfie. You can please take your selfie on our hashtag #ActForEarth, which is the hashtag for the WSDS. And as he started it, we are trending in Delhi today as far as Twitter is concerned. Honorable Minister, you've given us a challenge of moving this summit to a place where it is needed. We, 15 years back, had to remove the Davos cult and brought it to Delhi. And from Delhi, I think the challenge will be taken up, and I have my leadership in front of me, and maybe it's Darbhanga or Chhattisgarh or Hazaribagh. So we should look at how, thank you, and looking at transferring India through this platform. So may I also say that we did have regional dialogues, but not at that level, but at the state level. We went to Guwahati, we went to Mumbai, and we had one in Delhi, and we had one in Bangalore before we came to Delhi. We did have voices from the ground to have culminated into this summit, but of course, your challenge is taken. Your Excellency, Executive Director, Mr. Solheim, you have been a friend of Terry for several years, and we hope, we've cherished this friendship, and we hope we will continue this friendship with your new hat at the United Nations. It's been great that you have talked about several actions that you have also seen on the ground, and we will take up the challenge and get the corporate sector involved in it. Mr. Mukundan, the Managing Director of Tata Chemicals, he is more close to us as the chairman of our Executive Council. He was there since morning. We had a deliberation in the morning with some of the experts from within Terry, my senior colleagues. And the two things that has been brought down on our notebooks is how do business sectors engage and expand. And of course, one of the challenges that you've given us is how does Terry create Indian benchmarks for the private sector. And we would take this challenge. Mr. Ashok Chawla, Chairman, and Dr. Mathur, Director General Terry, thank you for your encouragement, inspiration, and motivation throughout the preparation process to not just the Secretariat, but to all the colleagues in the Institute. Everyone came together. We are extremely proud of our Business Council members who have been proactive in the approach and the stride to operate in environmentally responsible manner. We had 3 business tracks in the morning, which was mainstreaming biodiversity for responsible business, valuation of energy cost in the Indian context, and the transition to a better refrigerants. And we had several corporate members who were part of this. This is a clear sign of business moving from social responsibility to a more strategic business decision and being part of the solution, as I mentioned earlier. We do have 2 plenary sessions, but I would like to mention that we do have a very small session which comes in between. It's the first time where we have a smart plugin where we will be featuring these innovators who have come and exhibited their products at the exhibition. We are allowing them to move out of the exhibition area, come on stage here, and share 30 seconds of what they have done in their innovation, the innovation that they have, and all of you will get a chance to look at them. With this, I thank everyone who's present here and the dignitaries on the dais, and I would like to end my vote of thanks by assertively reposing my faith in Indian businesses. Sir, I would like to borrow what you mentioned about Mahatma Gandhi, and it is that businesses will be the change that we want to see in the world. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And now we have a small presentation to make. We have some plants which I believe have been grown organically in the Himalayan foothills in Uttarakhand by farmers in partnership with TERI. And I'd like to invite yes, Doctor, how do we want to do this? Please go ahead.
Okay, they call the shots. I know this will be difficult to take, but we'll manage that.
Always have some friends.
Thank you very much indeed. I think there's a short little photo opportunity now. Thank you very much indeed. Thanks to the panel.